Hey everybody, it's Audrey from Audrey Approved. I don't watch a ton of tag videos, but today I'm going to do a tag video because I have been seeing this mid-year book freakout tag all over BookTube, and I found it's a really great way to get to know somebody's reading taste in a single video. And so I'm going to jump on the trend. I'm going to change some of the questions because I feel like it, but hopefully it'll give you a good sense of what I like to read and what I've been reading recently. I think when it comes to my favorite book of the year so far, at least when it comes to fiction, that is The Summer That Melted Everything by Tiffany McDaniel. I listened to this on audiobook, and if you're going to read this, you should listen to it on audiobook because the narrator has an accent. He's got a little bit of a drawl, and it really added to the Southern Gothic vibes that just kind of emanate from this piece. The Summer That Melted Everything is about a family. It's a bit of a coming of age story from the point of view of one of the sons in this family. And the premise is that the father of this family has invited the devil to come stay with them. And the devil shows up, and the devil is another young boy. And it covers a summer where both the community and the family kind of break apart, but I found it super atmospheric, super descriptive. I loved the use of language from McDaniel in this, and I thought it was just a really captivating and engrossing read. So I don't do a ton of series, at least not lately, but this was such an easy question to answer because my favorite sequel of 2022 was The Two Towers by J.R. Tolkien. I listened to both The Two Towers and The Return of the King in 2022 so far, and I listened to them as audiobooks narrated by Andy Serkis, who is the actor that plays Gollum in the films. And he's a fantastic, he's an actor, but he's a fantastic voice actor as well. And I just feel like he really brought the stories to life. He brought the characters to life. He brought the songs and the poems to life that are all throughout the books. And yeah, I mean, this is a fantasy classic, or just a classic period for a reason. I think that this story in this world is maybe one of my favorite stories of all time, and I thoroughly enjoyed my reading of it this year. For a new release that I haven't read yet but want to, so it's already come out in the first half of the year, I am jumping on the train. I am really interested to read Labvona by Atesha Moshfegh. I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation last year, and it was weird and not what I was expecting, but I liked it. I didn't love it, but I did really like it. And I think I'm interested in Labvona because the synopsis sounds so different from at least the one other Moshfegh book that I've read, and so I'm really intrigued by it. I think there's also a high likelihood that I will DNF it, but I am really interested to try it, and there's so much hype around it, which makes it fun. For nonfiction, I'm also interested in The Impossible City by Karen Chung. There are 3 books about Hong Kong that I think were published last year or early this year, and I want to read all of them, and I haven't gotten to any of them, but this is one of them. It has, I think, the best cover of the 3, and so I have it on hold at the library right now, but I haven't gotten to it yet. In a similar vein, I do have anticipated releases for the second half of the year. For fiction, I have The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon, which is a new addition to my list of books that I want to read because I watched, I think it's Lexi's Library. I know her name's Lexi. I'll put her picture here. I watched her version of this video, and she talked about this book so many times, and she described it as this fantasy romance with this quirky world, and I'm just really intrigued. I immediately went onto NetGalley and I requested an advanced reader copy of this, and I was given it, so it's sitting on my Kindle, but I just haven't gotten to it yet. I think it comes out in August, maybe September. I will also put it up here. And then for nonfiction, I'm really interested in The Fisherman and the Dragon by Kirk Wallace Johnson. This is an author who wrote The Feather Thief, which I read last year, which is a microhistory, which is maybe my favorite genre or subgenre within nonfiction. And that book is about fly fishing lures, not the actual sport of fly fishing, but the lures that you make to try and attract the fish. And some of these lures are really elaborate with their knots and their materials can include really crazy feathers, specifically feathers from birds of paradise from Papua New Guinea, many of which are endangered. And so it covers a story of this like boy obsessed with making these lures, and then he steals a whole bunch of these flowers, and it was just so random and nothing I knew anything about, and I loved it. And so similarly, I don't know anything about what happens in The Fisherman and the Dragon. I know it's about Vietnamese fishermen, and I think it's set in Texas, and that's all I know, and that's all I want to know until I get to the book, which is also on hold at my library, and I will be reading the day that it releases, and I'm first in line, so I'll get it first. For biggest disappointment, I'm gonna answer this two ways. A lot of people have been doing their least favorite book, and so for me, that is the only 1-star read that I had this year so far, which is Heroes and Villains by Angela Carter. Now, I read another Angela Carter book, I think it was last year. It's called The Bloody Chamber, which is a selection of short stories, and they're all kind of dark. It's not horror, but they're dark and they're suspenseful, and they have usually a feminine twist to them, and I liked it. I didn't love it, but I did like that book. But I fucking hated Heroes and Villains. It is like this post-apocalyptic, I think it's written in the late 1960s, about basically two populations of people. One, which is called the professors, which live like in more urban cities, and another group called the barbarians, who are described as having darker skin and being uneducated and like filthy and living in grime. And it's about like a girl, really not a woman, a girl from the first group that, you know, ends up living with the barbarian tribe. And it is like fucked up, it's racist, I think it's imperialist. It has the worst descriptions I have almost ever read. They're just so convoluted, and so I absolutely hate that book. So that was a big disappointment. I immediately got rid of my copy of it. And then in terms of a disappointment, as in like, it wasn't the worst book I read, but I really wanted to like it, but I didn't. That is Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. This is the first Agatha Christie that I've ever read, and my late grandmother really loved Christie and this like Poirot series. I really wanted to like it, but I just didn't. I thought it was kind of predictable and slow for being like a mystery book, and I didn't love the portrayal of women. I know this was written a while back, I don't know in which decade, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to, and so I'm probably not going to read anything else from this Poirot series, although I do still want to try to read, I think, and Then There Were None, which is another Christie book that is very highly rated, so I'm gonna try that one, but I am disappointed that I didn't like Death on the Nile. Biggest surprise was The Three-Body Problem by Xijin Liu, and I'm interpreting this as not like I'm surprised that I liked it. I was surprised as in like I didn't know where the plot was gonna go. So like if you read Piranesi, for example, which I read last year, not this year. Actually, I think I read it in 2020. That is like a prime example of like, you're reading the book and you're like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where this plot is going. I don't know who these characters are. And you really have to trust the author to deliver you to a place where you do understand what's happening and what's going on. And I really like reading books like that because, you know, there's like this relationship that evolves between you and the author, and, you know, you really have to trust that they will lead you there. And so for me, I thought that The Three-Body Problem was really interesting conceptually in where it went. I had no idea where it was going when I first started it, and while I didn't love this book, I think I gave it 3 stars, partly because I don't think it has any memorable characters at all. I was, you know, very surprised with where the plot went and, you know, really eager to find out what happened. I'm also not continuing with this series unless somebody can convince me to continue with it, but I was glad that I had read it and that I could participate in discussions about it. For favorite new author, you know, I did really like The Summer That Melted Everything, and that was a debut by Tiffany McDaniel. I know since then she's released Betty, which is either biographical or fiction based on her mother's life. I think that was released last year, so I do really want to read that. And then not an author in terms of words, but an author in terms of art. I really loved the graphic novel series Coda by Simon Spurrier and Matthias Bergara. And in particular, Matthias Bergara has this like art style that's really chaotic but really detailed, and I love the coloring. And this is, you know, such an amazing graphic novel series about it's a magical world that has lost its magic, and it has some strong like Lord of the Rings and Mad Max vibes. And yeah, I just was really into this series. I was really into the art, and so I'm eager to read anything new that comes out from this graphic novel artist. So like many people doing this tag, I don't have a favorite crush or a new fictional crush. And so I'm adapting this a little bit to be my favorite romance, which I also don't have like a romance that I absolutely loved this year. I did read Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is my favorite of the 3 contemporary romance books that she's come out with in the last few years. But I feel like my favorite part of that book was not the romantic aspect, but kind of our main female characters coming up to terms with kind of some new information that arises after her father's death. And so her experiences with that was my favorite part of Beach Read. So I think for an actual romance, I'd pick Heartstone by Catherine White, which is a fantasy retelling of Pride and Prejudice. And this is a series. I think there's 4 books in the series. I only read the first book, and I'm only interested in the first book because it doesn't deviate very much from the original source material, and it hits all the major plot points with the same kind of cadence as the original Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. And I just love me, you know, I love me a Lizzie and Mr. Darcy. That's maybe my favorite book couple of all time, like the original Pride and Prejudice. And so I thought this adaptation was fun and really faithful to the original, but also fresh in its retelling. For newest favorite character, I had to think for a little bit on this because I feel like I read a lot of books where I don't like the characters, and that's fine with me. Sometimes that's what makes the books more interesting. But I did read a few classics this year, one of them being Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, which I read in like maybe junior high or probably high school English class. And, you know, I think reading this book, especially with all of its conversations about race, I think you need to be like kind of mature to like appreciate this piece and have thoughtful discussions about it. And so I don't think that I was that mature in high school, at least not enough to truly appreciate this. But reading it now at like 31, I really did enjoy it. I thought that Huckleberry Finn in particular is a really endearing character. I mean, he's naive and he's superstitious and he lies and he cheats and he kind of tricks his way out of situations, but he also grows this sense of morality across, you know, the pages of this book. And it's a really natural sense of morality that emerges out of all of these experiences that he has. But I don't know, I just found him endearing as a character. I find his character like hopeful. And yeah, for a book that made me cry. So again, I don't have like a book that actually gave me tears. I think the last time I cried over a book was when Dumbledore died in, I don't know, Harry Potter 5 or 6. But I'm going to interpret this 2 ways again. One is the book that made me the saddest, or like the saddest book that I read, and that was How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This is a book about a plague. It's plague fiction. And it's each chapter moves forward in time across, like, I think the total time period is around 150 years, and then there's a few stories that are way further out. But they're loosely interconnected, kind of like Cloud Atlas, if you've read Cloud Atlas, which remains one of my favorite books. And, you know, for a book about a plague, a lot of people die, a lot of people lose family members, and there's a lot of grief and loss. And so it is a sad book, and so that one stands out to me for being sad. Another way to interpret the question of a book that made me cry is a book that made me very emotionally invested, because if somebody's crying, then they're feeling a lot of things. And so the book that made me feel the most emotionally invested this year was Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer, who is a journalist, and I like a lot of his other books, but this particular piece is a personal memoir of his experiences climbing Mount Everest in 1996 and the disaster that happened during that expedition. I do really love disaster books. I'm not quite sure what it says about me. And this totally fit the bill, but I've found that disaster books in general are more powerful when they are memoirs, and I think that tends to make sense. I'm thinking specifically of like Endurance by Shackleton is another disaster book that I also really, really love. But I felt super invested. I switched from an audiobook to an ebook to try and finish Into Thin Air quicker. I read it all within, I don't know, half a day. And yeah, I had to know what happened. So I felt very, very emotionally tied in to the events that occurred there. So that was definitely a standout of this year as well. For a book that made me happy, I have Lila Starr by Ram V and Felipe Andrade. So I mentioned Coda earlier as a graphic novel series that I finished this year that I really loved. But I also really liked Lila Starr. And Lila Starr is a standalone contemporary graphic novel. It is set in contemporary India, and I just thought it was really unique. It covers a lot of themes with life and death and, like purpose of life and all of that. But the pacing and the different types of perspectives, like who is narrating the story, change every section, and it was just like so fresh and so thoughtful and profound, but also just really endearing. So this is a book that makes me really happy. I want to buy a physical copy of it, so I can have that on my shelves. I only buy books after I read them, if I really, really loved it. So that definitely goes to show that I did. On the topic of buying books, the most beautiful book that I've bought so far this year. So I looked at my spreadsheets, because I have spreadsheets, and I have purchased 13 hard copies this year. A few more audiobooks, but 13 hard copies. And so I actually didn't think that a lot of them stood out, but the cover that I like the most is Trust by Hernan Diaz, which is I think a book within a book, both set in New York. And I purchased this on a trip to New York, so I thought that was really fitting. But I don't know, I just like the cover. I feel like it looks like literary fiction, which it is. It's something that I would, gravitate towards in a store, and I'd read the back flap, which is what happened and why I now own it. So this is my favorite cover of the year. I haven't read this. In terms of a book that I don't own, but I did read, and I liked the cover, I do really like Bliss Montage by Ling Ma, with all the different oranges on it. I don't know. Again, it's just something that if I saw it in a window, I would be like, ooh, I want to read the cover on that. Which is a collection of short stories, and some of them are a little bit fantastical. I did really enjoy that one as well. It's the first thing I've read from Ling Ma, but definitely stand out in terms of its content and its color, or its cover. And then finally, last question, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I'm working on an around the world book club project with my aunt and my cousin, and we are reading a book from every country, and we are on the middle of the seas right now, although I have skipped a few countries. And so this is going to be a multi-year project, and I need to keep chugging my way through those. I just finished the book from Comoros, which I really enjoyed. If you like paleontology and evolutionary biology, you might like this one. It's called A Fish Caught in Time, A Fish Lost in Time. I'll put the cover up here. In terms of other books I need to read, I do have arcs from Matt Galley that I need to get to. I mentioned The Redemption of Heart and Mercy. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, which I do need to read. I also need to read Babel, which I got a copy of, and I haven't read anything by R.F. Kuang. I haven't gotten to it yet, but everybody and their mother is putting it on their mid-year book freakout tag answer for like their most anticipated release for the second half. So I'm interested to check out the hype for that. And then I also have another book that I'm interested in, which is called, I think, Aesthetica by Ali Rowbottom, which I think is going to be a bit of like millennial, you know, angst mixed with some social media commentary. So I think that one should be good as well. So that is a little bit of a summary for my first half of 2022 reading trends and highlights and lowlights. And yeah, like I said, I like these because it gives me a sense of what kind of books different people read. And so if you liked any of these books, then talk to me about it, because I'm really trying to talk to people about books. It's the whole reason I made this channel. But yeah, I hope everybody's doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.